Jeanette is buried at Forest Lawn in Glendale. It's a very, very nice cemetery. Here's the entrance of it. She's buried in the Freedom Mausoleum, so when you drive inside, you find the signs and follow the signs to the Freedom Mausoleum. There it is. It's up on a hill at the very top. Here's the scenery around it. It's very beautiful. The grounds are beautiful. And here's the city of Los Angeles and Glendale that you can see. Now when you go inside, you turn right, you go down a ways and turn left. You'll see a bust of Alan Ladd, and that's how you know when you're in the right place. There it is. There's Alan Ladd, who's buried nearby. We're hoping to get a bust of Jeanette in there, too. Here is George Burns and Gracie Allen. And this is how it looks as of 1996. And there's Nat King Cole. Well, here's Blossom's grave, Jeanette's sister Blossom. Not many people know she's buried in the same place just outside the building of where Jeanette is buried. If you go outside with your car and follow that road around that you came up on, you will find it comes to a dead end around the Freedom Mausoleum. If you get out, park your car, go slightly forward and slightly to the left by a big tree. This is where Blossom's buried. She's buried next to her husband. That's her husband's grave. They're where they are buried under. So you look for the tree and you can't miss it. Hollywood Memorial Park, where Nelson is buried. As many of you know, this place is fairly run down. It's been in bankruptcy. As you can see by the sign, it's not kept up very well. Okay, this is right behind Paramount Studios. There's the entrance, and if you turn and look behind you, you can see the Hollywood sign. If you look in front of you, you will see Paramount Studios when you turn around. It's in the heart of Hollywood, which unfortunately is in a rundown neighborhood. You go inside and you drive straight back, you turn left, and on the opposite side of a big white building you will find Nelson's grave. He's next to Anne, his wife, and on his left is his mother, Isabel. Now these graves are usually well kept thanks to the fans from various clubs who come and put flowers on the grave and keep the area trimmed even when it gets a bit run down. This is an interesting cemetery because there's one section where Civil War veterans are buried. It's a shame that it's been allowed to get so downtrodden, but thankfully Nelson's area is kept up nicely, as you can see. There's a picture of the building behind it, so that's how you'll know when you're in the right place. Which, as I said, is right behind the cemetery. These are the famous gates that you will recall from movies. This is where Jeanette came to work when she first came to Hollywood. And I'm showing this to you so that you can see. There's the tower. You can actually see that from the cemetery. Our first stop will be in Burbank on Mariposa, which is just off Riverside Drive. This is where Jeanette and Nelson had their horses stabled and where they had a little house that they used sometimes, which has now been torn down in the 1990s. Here you see Nelson, and he is standing on Mariposa. Now in this picture you can't see the stables. The stables were on the left, and the house, the little house, is right behind where Nelson is standing, so you can't actually see it in this photograph. Here's another shot of Nelson. Here he is at the stables that was to the left of the picture that I just showed you before. This was called the Deneen Stables. It was also torn down to make way for this housing development, which I will show you. You would never know there had been a stable here, although there is one stable left on down the road before you cross what's known as the Los Angeles River. Here is a shot of the Mariposa house, unfortunately black and white. I took this in 1980. As you can see, there's still flower bushes in the front. There were rose bushes, and there were orange roses on some of them. There was a white picket fence. It was set back well away from the street. There was another house in the front, and these were both torn down a few years ago. The Deneen stable that was next door, the head of that stable, his name was, the owner was Jack Deneen. He was a policeman in Burbank, and he had another house also on his property set back, and it was very interesting because Bugsy Siegel and other people of that sort used to meet there and have illegal gambling parties, and Clark Gable used to go to them as well. And so there was an interesting history at the house next door to this little hideaway house. Here's a shot of Jeanette. She also stabled her horses here. Many stars did. And here she is. And you can see in the background, well, you can barely see, but you can see the mountains that make up Griffith Park, where they used to ride behind there. Today, there you can see the bridge over the LA River, quote unquote, which is usually very dry. They used to ride over there, and you could ride up into Griffith Park. These are the mountains that are behind Griffith Park. This is the only stable left. It used to be called Studio Stables. As you move down the street, you see there are commercial type things going on. This used to be to the right of the Mariposa house. And this is where the house and the stables were. It's now a housing development. You'd never know what used to be there. Okay, on to Hollywood. Jeanette lived at the Knickerbocker Hotel for a while after she came to Hollywood. When she first came, she spent time here, and she also spent time at a Beverly Hills hotel. She lived in hotels for quite a while until she got a house that she rented on Vine that was way up in the hills where the street ended. The Knickerbocker, she complained, was too noisy. That's why she left. The TikTok restaurant used to be near there as well, where Jeanette and Nelson used to eat. This is Hollywood Boulevard as it looks today. And theater. recently restored on Hollywood Boulevard next to the inevitable MacDonald's. This is more of Hollywood Boulevard. They are working very hard to get it back into shape. It was quite run down in the 1980s. A lot of traffic. There's the El Capitan. It was showing Hunchback of Notre Dame the day I filmed it, and behind it is the Roosevelt Hotel. Across the street is what was Grauman's Chinese. It's now Mann's. Okay. Jeanette's handprints and footprints were put in next to Maurice Chevalier. They did it together. December 1934. Now Nelson didn't put his in till about 4 years later, but his are catty-corner to hers, as you will see. Everyone always says she had such tiny feet when they put their feet in her spots. There's Nelson, with his big hands and feet. Okay, here we are going up Hollywood Boulevard just to give you an idea of what it looks like. The exterior looks the same, pretty much as it did back in the 30s. Okay, now here is a shot from Malibu of Pacific Palisades and Santa Monica, and we're starting our tour at the beach. We're going to go to the beach house that Nelson bought for his mother after he married Aunt Eddy. So we're going to drive up Pacific Coast Highway, and we're going to show you that part. Here's Puerto Marino Drive. You turn left. That white house will come back to. Thelma Todd owned that house. Okay, here's the house. The address is 17720 Puerto Marino Way. It's right behind the ocean. It's not too far up, as you can see. Now, Pacific Coast Highway was not the way it is today, so there is a staircase. You used to be able to just go go right down to the water. Today the staircase is still there, but you would have to cross at the light. You might get killed otherwise. The house has been pink all the years that I've driven by and seen it. It's not a pretentious house by any means. As we go back down the hill, we pass Thelma Todd's again, and as you know, she had a cafe there, and that's where she was found dead, and that was quite a big scandal in the mid-1930s. Never totally solved it. Who did it? Now we drove up Sunset Boulevard away from the beach, and we're in Brentwood, which used to be a quiet little town until O.J. Simpson came along. Here we are on Halvern at 485 Halvern Drive. This is a house that Nelson owned and lived in from 1940 to 1946. Fred McMurray bought it from him and lived in it until he died, and his widow still lives there now. As you can see, Nelson, surprisingly, for a movie star, did not have huge mansions, and they were not set way back off the street. It was quite accessible. And I don't know if he realized how many fans actually would come by, park, and try to stare into his windows, but that did occur. That's the house. Okay. Now we're at 166 Ashdale Place. That was the last house Nelson owned. He bought it in 1951. He had a separate studio and a separate entrance. To the right of the house, you'll be able to see it. Right there. This was his wing of the house. Anne had the other side of the house. This is also in Brentwood, not far from the Halvern house. Now when we leave here, we're going to continue up Sunset Boulevard after we leave Ashdale and go into Beverly Hills, and you will see that Nelson owned many homes in Beverly Hills. Well, first we're going to stop at Twin Gables. You go up Bel Air Road, off Sunset, it's near UCLA, and you drive up, and this is what is left of Twin Gables. And I say this is what's left because, as you see, there was one fence put up and then a second one. They don't want people looking over and seeing what the house looks like. This is about all you can see from the back, which is unfortunate because the exterior of the house has not been changed much. And I'm going to show you some shots of what it looked like when Jeanette was there. But even if you stand on your car, you can hardly get a decent shot of it anymore. Look, that shows you. It's set up like a fortress. And this is the view down Bel Air Road. You can see much of the city. As it looked in its heyday when Jeanette was there. She really loved this house. She moved in after she married Jean in 1937, and she lived there until moving to the last place that she lived, which was the Wilshire Comstock. But she was never happy once she moved out of this house. No matter what was going on in her life, this was the house that she loved. Gables up off Benedict Canyon is 1330 Angelo Drive. This is a house on a property, not the main house, but what Nelson used to call an ex-hunting lodge. Must have been used as one before that. He first rented this in the summer of 1937, and after that nobody heard much about it, but apparently he kept the place as a hideaway, and I learned about it in the Isabel letters from the 1940s. Nelson still had it. Here's the scenery around it. The house itself was hidden far back. You couldn't see it from the front, but they did describe the driveway and the locked gate that was there even back in the 40s. It's very, very high up on a hill, difficult to get to. You can see a view of the entire city of Los Angeles there. You can also see the water around there. It looks like it was a sort of second Lake Tahoe for them. It made you feel like you were out in the mountains and up near a lake, even though you were in the middle of Los Angeles. Now these are shots taken around the area so you can see just a bit of the magnificent view, and there are birds chirping up there, and it's just no traffic. It's beautiful. I did not get to film the house that was at Stonydale. Now that was in Tahunga Canyon. It was another hideaway house. It's also off the street, and there's a really mean dog that barks at you if you try to get near there. That house was purchased by MGM. It was owned there. Clark Gable used to go there again and take prostitutes there. The house later went to Nelson, and Nelson used it for a while in the late 30s. The house later went to Errol Flynn, who used it until it went into the hands of some other people, non-movie star people, and it was passed down to this day. Okay, now we're in Beverly Hills. First stop is 721 North Roxbury Drive. Nelson lived here from 1935 to 36. He had to move quite frequently, and he went up and down the streets basically between Santa Monica Boulevard and Sunset Boulevard, getting new houses as the fans found them out. He often had Spanish-looking houses in those days, but of course that was prevalent. Now we're at 617 North Beverly Drive. We believe this house was leased from 1934 to 35. Now we're at 703 Alpine Drive. That was the next house after the Beverly Drive, and also we think it was leased. Nelson wasn't quite sure he was going to stick around in Hollywood until Naughty Marietta came out and was a hit. So he didn't really settle down permanently. Nelson gave his address in 1947 as 710 Camden Drive, which was interesting because the house was owned by Jeanette, and her mother lived in that house until her death in that very year. So, not quite sure about the story about that. Now we're at 619 West Foothill. Nelson owned this house in 1937. Again, these are not fancy homes that are in the ritzy area south of above Sunset Boulevard, actually. This is in the area that's called the Beverly Hills Flats. Nelson had a second home on Alpine Drive at 805. He owned it from 1935 to 37. He lived there for a while after his marriage to Anne, and his mother remained there as well. It's been torn down. Look at these gorgeous palm trees. Here we are at 517 North Elm. Nelson lived here in 1934, probably rented or leased. This is not the same front. More beautiful trees. Okay, here we are at 720 Maple Drive. This was Aunt Eddy's house, and for a while after they got married, until 1940, Nelson moved in and they lived here. This was until Halvern was gotten. It's actually built. Okay, here we are on Wilshire Boulevard at the Wilshire Comstock. This is where Jeanette moved in. There are two buildings. This is the first one. She lived here in the early 60s until she died on the 8th floor. Now, an interesting thing, there are two buildings. The building on the left, our left, was lived in by Aunt Eddy after Nelson died. And of course, in my research, I went there to find out when Anne had gotten this place. To my amazement, I found that Aunt Eddy had never gotten that place. It was gotten by Nelson, and that he had had it since Jeanette was alive. About the time Jeanette moved in there, Nelson got a place as well. Here's the second building. And that was kept very quiet. I don't think anybody knew Nelson had a place at the Comstock. However, Anne lived there after Nelson's death, and then she lived there for quite a long time. For a short period of time, then she moved up the street a couple of blocks and then went to a nursing home. Now here is MGM Studios. Of course, it's Sony Studios today. They've taken down the big sign and moved it that had the picture of the MGM lion on it, but that's the gate. You just saw the gate where Nelson used to come in, and Jeanette and everyone else. Now here I am driving up the street. I wanted to show you the whole expanse of how huge this studio is. It's quite a few blocks. Inside, the sound stages, everything are still there. You just don't see the big MGM sign anymore, which is really sad because even though it had gone through a lot of different owners, including Laura Marr, they left the sign up there, the big logo, until just recently. See, this is how far down you go. This is in Culver City. It was not a very long drive from their homes in Beverly Hills and or Bel Air. Now, Nelson also owned a home at 155 Hudson from 1946 to 1951. This is in the Hancock Park area near Hollywood. Jeanette also had a home there before her marriage to Jean, and that was at 441 North June Street. However, the numbers of those homes there have all been changed since that time, so we didn't get pictures of them for you.
Well, the Tahoe Tavern Hotel was located just in the circle here and was the headquarters for entertainment back then. There was a gorgeous ballroom, theater, and the cast and crew, including Jeanette, MacDonald, Nelson, Eddy, she's making fun, frequented that. Also the railroad that was the end of the line in Truckee now, but it used to come to Tahoe City. And the railroad went right in front of the hotel so that these important guests could arrive right at the front door of the hotel, or they could come in by the steamer Tahoe here in the water. This was a gorgeous spot, you can imagine. Quiet, serene. How could you help but not enjoy? Right?
Marjorie, was that the tree?
It's where they filmed Jeanette going into the water. This is beautiful. Look at this.
Where?
Right there in front of you.
Here?
Yeah, is this all right?
That's farmer's lunch. Precious. Right, oh, that's the bottom of the rock.
And bacon.
Isn't that great? That is great.
For our lunch, our rosemary lunch.
New. You see that point right there. And there was discussion, I mentioned this on the van I was on, But there had been discussion as to whether that canoe scene was done here at Cascade or at Emerald Bay. But the consensus of opinion is that it was done here at Cascade. So this little area, this little cove, like right in here, with that point in the background, was really where the canoe was. Now, when the beans and bacon thing, when they went up in the elevation just a little bit, there again, when you saw them eating the beans and bacon, you could a bit up this direction.
Like a ridge.
Yes.
They were coming, he
That
climbed her up, remember? It was a ridge.
So all of this area was where, where she fell off the horse and where the horses went across the lake, this is also the area where that was done. And Harold, I mentioned this to some, but Harold Ebright was out of camera range, and horses don't like water, so to even get the horses in the water, one horse will follow another, but he was out of camera range and leading those horses. So those three scenes were done right here.
Right here.
Uh-huh.
What happened to the
We've
sand?
seen Nelson rescuing her.
Sand, that, yeah, I asked Rick about that because there was a sandy area, I do, but,
Gone.
yeah,
Gone.
yeah.
All there is rocks. They
Yeah.
could have brought the sand.
Chambers Landing, they talked about a lot when they were doing the filming because Chambers Lodge sat right up there, approximately where all this restaurant area is now. And along the sandy beach were all the little separate cottages. And Jeanette's cottage was down here on what is now the beachy area. So all of this was a complex. Now, in those packets too, again, where in the section on Chambers Landing, there are some views of the lodge as it was together with the little cottages that were down here on the beach. Now, Chambers Bar, which is over here over the water, that is an original building. That was here when the lodge, because it was there were a little recreational area, the little bar. And there's an upstairs. Inside, it has the original flooring and the original siding to that little building. And that's where all they said that Nelson Eddy always enjoyed going over there to play pool.
Oh, I
So
see.
that was part of the complex of the Chambers Lodge, all the little cottages that were here that they rented, and Jeanette stayed in 26, I think it was. And the bar area was their recreational area.
Okay, that was a recreation.
Yes.
area. Okay.
And when I was here last year at this time, it was open. I just went in and had a Coke. But anyway, we can walk over because there's loads of windows you can see inside very easily. So we'll take a walk over. But this is the actual area where the cottages stood, where Jeanette stayed.
Were they on
And
the sand at
yes,
that time?
oh, where the sand. All right, now what? I'm the lady that had the key to the junkyard and went inside. My daughter said, "You don't mean to tell me you actually went to the junkyard?" I said, "You bet I did." Because you can see one from here, but there's several under all the debris. And I think it's so sad. Now, I didn't want to say anything about the totem poles or rock any boat or make any waves until we came and saw them. And then I'm going to get on a campaign to get these things out and given to the museum, which is where they should be. How did you know this was a junkyard? This is another one of those things that I kept asking until I found out where they were.
There's the totem pole.
Unbelievable.
In a junkyard. Here we are in a junkyard.
And Marjorie said this millionaire that owns this didn't care. He wanted to stay there.
Yeah, well,
He didn't care. Oh, there it is. Didn't matter to him.
I want to thank, yes, Yes, he was.
Only a
And-
man would have said.
No, he was a gentleman. He was a gentleman. But anyway, in regards, I've had a lot of questions about the totem poles.
Yeah.
And the totem poles you saw at Emerald Bay were made in Hollywood.
Aw.
Yes, they were made out of plaster of Paris and chicken wire. And they were mounted on poles inside and put together. They were not hand carved, they were not, no. They were all prefabricated in Hollywood. And the totem pole dance that you saw last night was really authentic. I think I pointed out to you there was about 200 Indians, Hollywood Indian. The rest were Indians that came from Nevada. And some of those totem poles, we had two in front of the hotel here, which my dad was able to acquire through his relationship with the production manager and what have you. And they put them up for my dad. And so we maintained them. And when the Topals took over, we tried to take them down as gently as we possibly could. And there was some damage, but they were pretty fat. And Steve, I know, is going to when we're going to put sidewalks through the town, if and when and however. He's going to put two totem poles out in front, replicas of the ones that were here before.
Oh, that's nice. That's very nice.
Now I'm going to open it up to questions. Oh, by the way, tomorrow morning, we're going to go up into Alpine and show you where the Indian love call was. But it's going to, if you have binoculars, anybody have binoculars with them?
Yes.
Bring them with you. It's a good distance to look up to where they were.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
You're not going to sit on the rock where you're just saying.
I want to sit on the rock.
If you want to get on a horse, I'll take you up.
We understand Bill is
I
gonna
understand.
sing. He's gonna sing and then we'll
But I pointed out last night, in many years, I've been going back in there deer hunting, and I go past that same spot, and even as a kid, I still remember it, because that's where they shot that particular scene. And the log cabin that you saw last night was an actual log cabin. It was there, it was built by the forestry. And they utilized that, and when they rode up the trail, him and Nelson Eddy, this trail is still there. I ride into deer camp, I go right by it, it's all there. Except the log cabin, they tore it down, burned it down. Any questions? Don't hesitate. If I don't know the answer, I'm going to give you a lot of stories, I'll tell you. Huh?
Were you there at the actual filming of the love scene?
No, ma'am.
I'm not there, but you heard about it. You heard.
Well,
you heard it took place.
I was so involved because my father was so involved. And I became involved because I got my deer in the movie. So it was,
And you were around 15 years old at the time, right?
10 years ago. And I was very thrilled because I got to get out of school, right? So I went out to Cascade and I sat around for 4 days and finally they used my deer and I was paid $50 a day and then I take my deer home.
It's a big thrill for you.
Oh, it was. I got to meet Nelson Eddy and Jeanette MacDonald. It was good.
I arrived late. In case you didn't do it, would you tell us?
Was caught in a herd of sheep. And my dad was very, he's acquainted with all the sheep herders. Well, in those days, you knew everybody. And he knew all the sheep owners in the country. And he was very friendly with the owners of the sheep. And then the herders, he was acquainted with them because I used to go out with my dad, stay for 4 or 5 days in the sheep camp with them. But anyway, this particular day, as I remember, my dad came home and they had a big party at the sheep camp. He says, I got a deer for you. And I said, you got me what? And we got a deer. He was still in the spots, he was still spotted. But he got caught in the sheep, and the mother took off and left him. And deer are afraid of sheep, they're scared of them, so. And this was it was in the spring of the year. So he brought it home, and I started nursing it on a milk bottle. And as we gradually got older, I started feeding lettuce and stuff like this. And it grew up to be about almost a year old, and we had it out here in the barn. We had an old stable barn out here back. And I put him in there, and he got into some alfalfa, which caused a growth on his stroke. So my dad said, well, we're going to butcher him. You know, I'm just a young kid. I said, well, you know, I pleaded, but he says, no, he says, he's not going to make it. That was it. We had no veterinarians or nothing like that. But it became a much bigger deer than what you saw in the movie. Right.
That was a very small.
Calaneva had just been built. I don't think you're playing with Calaneva, right?
Right.
Calaneva sits on the state line, where part of it is in California and part is in Nevada. And that was a big hangout for a lot of the movie people who were here during that.
Is that close to here?
It's only about 9 miles up the road. If you like to gamble, go up there.
But what about Nelson and Calaneva?
Well, I don't know. I was home in bed.
Oh, I thought.
At the resort. I'll meet you on the road. What time is that? They shot looking at them in the background.
Bill, speak up a little bit. I'm sorry, Bill. You have to.
When
No,
they
that's
were,
okay. No, just, I'm talking for them. I can
I'll
hear
talk
you.
a little louder. My wife says I talk too loud.
No, you're
She told me you
fine.
talk too much.
That too.
By the way, I can't find a pistol.
Oh.
I'm blaming that on my wife. She put it away someplace.
Safe. Yeah, she put it away safe.
Couldn't find the pistol.
Goes up into that heavy brush you see over there below that bare rock.
Yes.
2, 3, 4, or the easier way would have been the second tree off on the right.
And that's where they did it. That's the rock.
You have to get over to
That's the rock. The second tree from the right.
Once you're sideways and that's straight.
How did Jeanette get up there?
Second from the right, Bill? I think I see which one.
From the right, going left would be the second tree.
And the rock is still there.
The rock is still there.
Would you do me a favor and take a picture of it?
This direction.
I'll go.
This massive rock right here. No, the only thing that echoes in here are coyotes.
You mean there is no rock where you can sing through my mind?
Well, we have an echo like that.
A picture of everyone taking pictures.
Bill will get me a horse. We'll fly over and take all your cameras with us. Can you get them?
Did you stand? You want to come the right way?
If you start it from the right,
Okay, after I take you.
This is the background behind that you saw in the film when they were singing Indian Love Call.
Yeah, I'm going to go up above the bands. I'm going to go up above the bands a little.
Okay. And here we are,
Background that they had.
circling around.
the only thing was a dirt road. Down here, I told you earlier this morning about the resort, the small hotel that was down here called Deer Park Lodge.
Yes.
Well, that was down about 300 yards next to the creek.
The creek.
The creek. There's a creek that goes down through this canyon. And above the creek was an old barn. And it was there up until the late 1950s. And there was still a dirt road coming in here. At the time they made the movie, it was just a dirt road, and some places there were no for 2 cars. You had to back up to get in here. So that a lot of times they just herded the horses from Tahoe City out here and put them in the corrals and left them out here, and then they used them during the day to go up here. And as you note, when you go out, you'll see a stables down here on the right. The fella that started that stables was a packer who took all these people up, but he's no longer with us.
Bill, how long did it take you to herd the horses up here from Tahoe City?
Oh, probably half an hour.
And how long did it take to maneuver the trail?
He said they herded them
Go up
up
to where
here.
they were, up to 5 Lakes. It's about an hour. It would vary depending on how many packs they had, but right now it takes about an hour and 20 minutes to get up to 5 Lakes.
Did they have to do this on several different days to take
Yeah,
retakes?
continually.
How many retakes did they make?
I can't recall, man. I don't know. But they were out here quite a while.
Did they have to
Really?
go up that trail more than one time?
Oh, yes.
They do
Oh,
it over
yeah.
and over and over.
Oh, yeah.
It's not easy.
But once they got the equipment up there,
Right.
all they had to do was bring out the cameras and the reflectors and stuff like that. They left there. So if they went up to shoot the next day,
Yeah.
why then it was.
And this is where you said they just, at the end, they just left all the...
They left discarded the reflectors and stuff like that. The cameras, of course, they came out for all the expensive equipment. The reflectors, they just left them. And now they were there for years. We used to go buy them all the time. I never thought of taking one or a piece of it as a souvenir. No, you never gave it a thought.
You didn't know you were going to be a tour guide.
No.
60 years later,
Could have made
should
a
have planned
fortune.
ahead.
And over here, you have the Cap Theater for making noise and throwing popcorn. And this is it, the Capitol Theater and dance hall, apparently. Established 1870. There you go. Here is the inside of what was the Capitol Theater in Truckee. That's the stage, and stars used to perform up there. It's now like an antique store. Small thing upstairs. Downstairs was a saloon and a restaurant.
Bounty
Well, I
office,
got to point out to you.
the bounty office and the little hotel,
Yeah.
and was not, oh, people, here's the tree. I know, that tree was there.
This tree was here.
And this tree was here.
But this whole area of trees, it was just a little meadow in here. A little meadow out in here. And it was sort of blocked by the trees. But what they've done is they took all the trees out, done some land filling and what have you now.
Okay, if I read the film correctly, that group of trees is where the little steamboat came around that
No, it came from this direction.
It came from this
This
direction?
point down here.
Oh, that point.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the pier was out just about out from this rock.
Oh, here.
In the middle there. Okay. Now, the little hotel,
Yes.
and he's saying just
for you.
Yeah.
okay, the lake was to his right,
Yes.
and he had his foot up on something.
Yes.
Would that not have been over there in that corner somewhere?
No, because that was heavily wooded over there at the time.
No, I mean this
It'd
side
be
of
over,
the
it'd be
boathouse.
over on this side, over here. This side of the rock.
Oh, this side of the rock.
The rock would have been that hotel?
No,
The
no,
hotel.
the hotel sat back into the trees.
Into the trees.
So you have to visualize there were a lot of trees here.
Oh, I see.
Okay, do you want to just put your little feet on that soil for a minute?
Yeah.
But see those streaks coming down the mountain over there?
Yes.
That's where the bear slid down off the mountain.
A blur?
But truthfully, there was a flume that went along that level there, the top of where the streaks come down. It goes over to what they call Marlet Lake. And they had a flume that went along there to supply water because there was a tremendous amount of logging going on over incline. that time, which was in those days was not known as incline, but it is incline now. But that was a big flume, and they diverted water over there to get the, and put the water, and they barged the logs out again, and took them to Glenbrook.
Is that incline really?
This is Carnelian Bay, where the trading post was. And here's a tree that was here. Okay, right here is where the hotel stood. And that's where Nelson's saying, just for you, where Marjorie is standing right now. It's been torn down, obviously.
Jeanette MacDonald kind of walks away and she goes up on the hill and she starts singing Three Blind Mice.
Yes.
Well, that was taken up, that photograph, actually she wasn't there if you notice, Hollywood technology. She was, that photograph when she was singing that was taken up on that peak, that's Maggie's Peaks up there, and was taken looking up towards the bay. Now, there's also a scene there where they have, where the Indian village is what we're going to do at this point. Those of you that feel capable of walking, we're about a quarter of a mile to half a mile from this actual site where the scene was filmed. And we're going to walk on a trail. The trail, not real steep, but there's some little ups and downs, some narrow areas. So you have the option of walking out there with me. It'll take us about a half an hour to walk out, about a half hour to come back down. Those of you that don't want to walk that entire distance, this is our boat camp area. There's some picnic tables. There's a dock. We can actually walk out onto the dock down here and look down to the site where that was filmed. Okay? So I'm going to give you the option of what you want to do. If you want to attempt to make it out there, and I'm the supervising ranger for the California State Parks in the west shore of Lake Tahoe. So I supervise here at Emerald Bay. The state acquired this land probably just after the filming took place. Yeah, probably about just around well actually D.L. Bliss, which is to the north of us, we acquired that land in the early 30s, 1933. I think this film was filmed in 35? Was it? Yeah. So the actual Emerald Bay itself, we started acquiring this property in the 1950s. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started, and we'll walk down the trail. And anybody need to make a restroom stop? It was huge, and they had a lot of people out there. They had horses and all the Indians that were there, tribes that were there. So I was looking around. I go, there's not a place that large, that clear, without trees. However, back in the late 1800s, 1880, 1890, part of the 1900s, they were doing a lot of logging around here. And so I know where the site is. I can just tell by the shape of the shoreline. But right now, it's pretty heavily forested again, just like this. So, 60, 70 years later, those trees are now pretty tall again. Matter of fact, that whole, looking at the film on that ridge over there, here at Emerald Bay, thousands of years ago, there were giant glaciers that were up in the higher elevations. And those glaciers actually came down through here at Emerald Bay, and where you were at Cascade Lake the other day. Glaciers actually formed those. That ridge line you see across there is a lateral moraine. As the glacier slowly moves along, it picks up boulders and rocks. In the movie, you see the ridge line. So I'm sure it was somewhere along this shoreline was Haman's Landing. I don't know the exact spot. I'm being immortalized on video.
Yes.
Are we rolling?
Yes.
We're rolling. This is the site where we think where Totem Tom Tom and the Indian village was. If you look at the scene where they film looking down on the stage, this little cove right here, this first cove, is what I believe to be the cove right in the background of that picture. As you look farther back behind me, you see what we call Maggie's Peaks. The wide open area, which is what we call the slide, actually occurred in 1955. So in Rosemarie, you don't see that slide in the film itself. Right. If you look to the right, or over here south of me, up in the top, one of the scenes that you'll see is what we call Mount Talac. And then that whole ridge line, you'll see that ridge line throughout the film towards the end when she's with Nelson Eddy and she's been rescued. All those scenes beyond that, if you look, you're going to see the back there of that lateral moraine from an old glacier that came down through Emerald Bay.
Okay.
That's all I know.
Okay, thank you. Area here is where they filmed Totem Pom Pom. The trees were planted in later. But as you see here, here's the sand and the beach, which is unusual for this part of Emerald Bay. There isn't a lot of a sandy, beachy area here. Okay. This does not really capture the beauty of Emerald Lake on video. You can't even capture it. It's magnificent in real life. But hopefully you get an idea of how beautiful it is and how the water glitters and sparkles. And it actually looks green when you're driving above and looking down at it. The water looks very green, very emeraldy.
Because see, when you drove down, you came on the road, see the road going along the slide, and the road goes over here, then right below where that timber is, that's the switchbacks. You drop right down into Cascade, and that's there.
Well, the ranger believes that this clearing here is where they filmed the beans and bacon scene.
Because of the background.
Because of the background, which is of the bay, which is right here.
The skyline.
The skyline.
The ridge, he keeps mentioning the ridge.
Yeah, he mentioned the ridge, that's true. And here it is. You think she sat on that rock over there?
Where the tree is?
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, when he pulled her out of the lake, he sat her on a log.
Now he says that the lake scene was filmed at Cascade.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Well, I hope this captures a little bit of the beauty of what it looks like. You know, you can't, the sparkling water and everything.
I think so, sure.
But on film it doesn't.
Well, it's never like it is when you see it with your own eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, the sun shining on the...
Rosemary House, so this is the owner.
I'm telling you,
The
this
cabin.
has got to be it. This has got to be it. Thank you, sir.
Or the cabin has been added on tremendously since this owner took it over. The street from the house, and this is where the crews ate. We have photos of the crew eating their meals, box lunches, just like we have.
Excuse for everybody in Hollywood to come up and camp in Lake Tahoe because they could have gone to Canada. But this was closer, cheaper, and everybody loved Lake Tahoe. And so this was a great destination in the 30s for Hollywood stars and so forth. So about that time, the man who bought this property all around here was going to make a log cabin development. This was built, and the reason it was built so close to the road is it was going to be the lodge for a log cabin community, a log cabin development. And this was in the 30s, so right around the time of the Depression, and it never really took off. As you can imagine, second homes weren't high on anybody's list at that point. So what he did was build this, never quite finished it, just sort of built it as an example. Never finished the interior, as I was saying before, dirt floor, windows were cut. This album here has a lot of the early photographs of the construction of the house. And it was built by an old guy and a couple of helpers. I don't know how they ever did it. Because it's, you know, you can see this incredible King's Truss cathedral ceiling. And it was quite a feat. But they did it, and it sat here then for a long time unfinished. But while it was here, when it first was completed but not finished yet, that's when the film company came up, and they contracted with Mr. Gray, who was the builder, the owner builder, and Gray Avenue out here is named after him. And so he let them use this property up the end of Gray Avenue, and that was the studio encampment. So they had a dance floor built, you know, a planked dance floor, and they had a commissary tent commissary, you know, a compound for the usual kinds of things, makeup and dressing rooms and all. And that was their studio encampment. They may have had others, but I think this was the main one, according to his widow. Because I never met him, I just met his widow. And she came up here a couple of times. She loved the restoration I had done, finishing the cabin, as Bill would have loved it, she said, you know. So I said, do you have any stories of the early days when they were up the road here? And she said, yes. She said he did have one great story that the film director,
Woody Van Dyke.
who was that?
Woody Van Dyke.
Yeah, he invited him to come up, Mr. Drake, to come up some Friday or Saturday night and have dinner with the crew and the stars and join the dance. You know, it was about it was Friday evening, I guess, something like that. And every Friday they had a dance band hired from the local community. So he came up there and had dinner with him. He's kind of a portly gent. And he has dinner, and then he sees, then the band, they strike up the band, and over here he sees Jeanette MacDonald sitting on a bench. So he goes over to her and he says, may I have this dance? And this is his widow relating the story. He says, that Miss MacDonald looked up at Bill and she said, do you know who I am? And he said, yes, but I'd like to dance with you anyway.
Very good.
And then she says he allowed is how she was a very good dancer. And he went around a few times around the makeshift dance floor. Oh yeah, she did that.